Hannah, Hannah Olariwaju. I'm an inclusion consultant working with Diversity Marketplace today. And what are we talking about today? How to create a culture of inclusion. And I'm definitely going to ask you questions in the coming moments about your current understanding around diversity, equity, and inclusion. But why do I do what I do? Why do I talk to organizations all around the world about diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially in 2024, while there's so many different opinions and thought pieces and think pieces out there in the internet? Well, my main MO, my main motivation about talking about this is that it makes it easier to talk about. When we initially started having conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion, it was othering, it was pushing or marginalizing people to the side, making them either stand out or even fade even more into the background. And now the conversation has really developed into firstly recognizing that we are all diverse, we all have aspects to about ourselves that make us different from the other person. And it's normalizing these conversations. It's normalizing talking about race, talking about gender, disability, neurodiversity. And it's making it not only easier to talk about it, but relevant. It's pushing it to the top of the agenda for all organizations, especially all of the organizations I've worked with throughout the years. And I wouldn't say it's been easier to talk about it throughout the years, but it's definitely become more meaningful. You can see that people are genuinely interested in it, right? It's no longer just a tick box exercise. It's no longer just doing it for the sake of doing it. Another word we would use is that it's no longer performative. And I'm so happy that I'm able to come here and talk to you today as well about this, because then it just makes me even feel even more that this is a genuine conversation, right? And this is no longer performative. So that's essentially what we're going to talk about today. We have an overview, full overview of what diversity, equity, and inclusion is about. We're going to discuss the different aspects to it, including are there any barriers to inclusion, especially within your organization as well. And then we're going to think about what can we do to improve? What can we do to be better, to become more inclusive? And I'm sure, 100% sure and reassured that you're doing so much already in that area. But what can we be doing just a little bit more to make it more of a culture of inclusion within our organizations, and also spilling over into the communities that we serve, because I know we are very much in a community working space. So that's me. That's a little introduction for me. And we're just going to get straight into sharing some slides and getting that common understanding together. So if you have any questions whatsoever, please do put them in the group chat or just call them out, because we do have a small group with us at the moment. So definitely open to listening to you. But we do have an hour session today. So quite quickly, and trust me, I can talk a lot. So we might, it might go by so quickly, but always remember to ask any questions that you have. I'm here as a resource for this time. Please do use me. Okay. Whenever I say that, I always feel a bit weird, like use me, but definitely do in this moment. Please do use me. Okay. So everyone can see my screen. I feel like that's one of the regular openings now on virtual delivery. So please let me know if you can't. Let's get started. So this is a CPD certified course. So you can get in contact with me or Gamil afterwards in order to get the certification and, get that stamped in your kind of like logbook or workbook that this is a course that you've done. Definitely helps to, just again, increase that credibility and genuineness within the organization. A little bit of housekeeping rules. This is intended to be a safe space. I really want us to be able to share experiences, to talk about how we feel, how we think around inclusion. So just a couple of housekeeping rules, but mainly here, please do take a comfort break. I know we only have an hour, but if you do need to take a comfort break, please go ahead. And if you are having any type of fire drill or any incidents in your organization, please do just let me know and exit the venue and everything like that. So just wanted to say that. Our high-level objectives of this course are to expand upon our knowledge, our confidence and competence in the areas of diversity, equity and inclusion. As I was saying earlier, I really want you to become comfortable with discussing this, talking to colleagues, talking to friends, to family, even, if needed, talking to strangers on the street about these type of topics. I want it to become very commonplace for you to do that. So we're definitely going to have a very good aim on that today. We're also going to be exploring, where does DE&I practice currently sit in Art for Health MK? What does that look like to you? What does an inclusive ecosystem look like to you? And how can we start adapting more inclusive practices such as allyship and unlearning and relearning in order to become more inclusive and help create inclusive conversations every day? And throughout this whole hour, we are really going to have an intention on what can we do to change, right? What can we be doing more of? And creating an action plan to help you and Arts for Health MK move from where you are to where you want to be. So these are our high level objectives for today. So doing that, we're actually going to be using Mentimeter, just really just to help us have that communication back and forth from us in a more easier way. I hope everybody's okay with using Mentimeter. At the top, we have where how you can join. So just type into your mobile device, menti.com, if you can, if you have an additional mobile device, or you can join on your laptop as well. Just open up an additional page. Both sides are going to.
Is this just on the browser on your mobile phone? You type menti.com. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Let's give it a go.
I can also put this into the chat group here to make it easier, but you can definitely see the same slides from this, and then you just need a code number, which I'll get for you now. 2484 2484 5362. Okay. So we have more joiners as well. Good morning. I'm Hannah Olariwaju, going to be delivering the session for you today. Hello.
Hi, Hannah.
Hi, Linda.
Hi, I'm Linda. Hi.
Nice to see you, or nice to meet you. I haven't seen your face yet, but let's speak.
Hi, Linda.
Okay,
hi, Ben. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Good. Sorry, what's
just
that
let you know,
code
Linda, that we're recording the session. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, no problem at all. Sorry, could you say the code again, please, Hannah?
Yeah, no worries. 2484 5362. And when you sign in, you should get like a little thumbs up just to let me know that you're in the room. If you can just click that thumbs up, and then I know that I'm joined by you in that room. So I'll give everybody a couple more seconds to log in. So I put it in the group chat, menti.com, and then you put in that code straight after. Let me know if you're having any difficulties whatsoever. Okay. And yes, please go straight ahead and answer the first question. I do have a couple of questions on Mentimeter today. It'll be really good to see your responses, get that interaction going. What do we mean when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion? So I'm going to go back and I'm going to share my screen. But like I said, if you have any questions, please let me know. Okay, let's see what, everybody's saying or your colleagues are saying. Okay, so we've got our first comment. Nobody left out. So this is what we mean when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And please do write whatever comes up for you, whether you're giving me a definition or like this, so nobody left out, which is such an important aspect of this discussion. Because before, when we used to really talk about DE&I, we used to talk about equality, right? And I am going to give you definitions of what these terms mean in a second, but especially when we see the statement nobody left out, we're really talking about the fact that we recognize each person, that we're paying attention to each person, that nobody feels excluded, right? Which is the opposite of inclusion. And I think that's a very powerful statement to start off with. So thank you for that. Nobody left out. What do we mean when we talk about DE&I? So access to organizations and equal, and I like how you capitalized and equal opportunity of success within that organization. And it's so important because this is when we start to recognize the difference between a tick box exercise, tokenistic action, right? When we have that and in between, because you can be tokenistic and provide access to different communities, right? But the difference between a tokenistic approach and a non-tokenistic approach is that equal opportunity of success and progression within that organization. You can definitely open the door, right? That's how we get diversity in. But that doesn't mean that once we're inside the room that we're being paid attention to, that people value us for who we are, right? So I'm really happy that we got those both two connecting sentences there together. Thank you for that. Opportunities available to all. Now, again, linking back to that first statement with nobody left out, so important, that all part, right? We're trying to make sure we're paying attention to everybody. And sometimes we can think we're doing that, right? We may be thinking, okay, I've posted it, maybe a job opportunity has come up, an opportunity to work in a project has come up, and you said, I've emailed everybody at the same time. That is equality, right? But then we start thinking about, have I made it an equal opportunity for everybody to reply or to apply to that project in the same way, right? And that's when we start thinking about equity, which I'm going to come into more detail in a moment. So yeah, thank you for that. What do we mean when we talk about DE&I? Everybody is an organization. Again, another powerful statement when we use the terms recognize and participate, right? Having that recognition, having visibility, representation, recognition are key aspects of diversity. We are unable really to see whether an organization has inclusive tendencies and practices if there's no visible diversity. That is the first. But then we also have the fully participate in an organization. Like I said before, we can have diversity, we can have a difference of people, but are they included, right? Another powerful statement. Thank you for that. All having access to the same opportunities, regardless of race, culture, religion, gender, sexuality, disability. Perfect. That is exactly what we mean when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay, great. Continue adding responses to that. Definitely want to hear your voices. I'm going to carry on with the slides, right? So let's make sure that we're all on the same kind of understanding level when we talk about these key terms. And diversity is what everybody has been saying. It's difference, right? Diversity equals difference, the range of human difference that we recognize and see in our world, right? Not just our race, not just our gender or gender identity, but it can also be our political beliefs, our personality, as we can see in this triangle here. It's kind of like a prism of diversity, really, just to be split up in these different areas. And what it just essentially shows is that there's different understandings of diversity if we were to measure it or monitor it in one way. We've got our inherent diversity, which is how we inherently view ourselves, how we measure ourselves, right? Something that we don't really rely on other people to give us is something that we see within ourselves. It's inherent to us. And then we have our experiential diversity, right? And this is as we grow through life, we go through socialization, school, work, making friends, we start to develop who we are, right? Our personality, how we like to work, how we like to communicate, and we start to make choices for the life that we have, whether we choose to, have a family, have a marriage or a civil partnership. And this is when we start to really understand our socio-economic status, which, yes, is something that you can be born into, but it's also a place of social mobility, a very high place of social mobility. And then we have our cognitive diversity. And this is how we see the world, almost like our reality testing, a word used in emotional intelligence understanding of how in tune with reality we are, right? And if you saw my emotional intelligence ranking, you would see I was quite low in this area. But as the Gen Z people say, the Lulu is the Salulu, right? So we move we move forward in that area. But cognitive diversity really outlines our individual experiences. Another term for this is our diversity of perspective or perspective of thought, right? Having our own unique view of the world and seeing how we can kind of contribute this to the workplace or the communities that we work with. So that's diversity. Then we have equity. And equity is a term that has slowly begun to replace equality in these discussions over the years, right? Equality is giving everybody the same thing, making everything equal so that as people are coming through the door, they have equal treatment. And that's fine. We definitely in most areas of social life need equality. But equity is that one step further. Equity is giving people what they need in order to make things fair, in order to produce fairness, right? Because we understand growing up in this society that we have that actually everything isn't fair. And just by giving everybody the same thing, as we can see in this image over here, doesn't mean that they have the same results, right? Giving everybody the same size rock doesn't result in everybody being able to see over the fence, as we can see in this figure here. But giving everybody what they need, and in this for this figure here is additional rocks to see over the fence, is what equity is. And if we think about our protected characteristics, we all require different things in order to make it through the work day, the work week, or even just to feel included in a workplace. who maybe is neurodiverse, that has dyslexia, right? They may need additional support, additional time to do work, maybe needs an software like Grammarly to help them with reports or emails, something that can give them that additional support that maybe somebody with dyslexia will not need, right? But by giving that individual with dyslexia that support, that additional software, that additional time, it leads to the same or similar success, right? And that's what equity is. I may not need it because I don't have dyslexia, but my colleague may need that software, may need that additional support, and we're going to be able to get to the same place at the end of the day, right? So that's what equity is. And then we have inclusion. And inclusion is where we all want to be. This is a state. This is a being, right? This is almost like an environment. And you will know in your environment if there's inclusion or if there's not inclusion. Because one of the ways that we know if inclusion is there is if we feel, so you and I in an organization feel valued, if we feel respected, if we feel supported, if we feel that we are being paid attention to, then we know we are in an inclusive organization. And there's many kind of like analogies around the world to describe what diversity and inclusion is. But in simple terms, diversity is the mix, right? Diversity is the difference of people. And inclusion is getting that mix to work well together. It's about cohesion. It's about recognizing differences and seeing it as a strength as opposed to seeing it as a weakness. And that is why it's so important to have these conversations, especially for organizations, right? We all have goals, whether it's business goals, social goals, community goals, and we get there faster, stronger together. So that's what we're trying to do when we talk about inclusion, right? So my next question for you, and thank you so much for your attention and your contribution so far, is based on the definitions we've had, the definitions you had in the beginning. Why do you think it's important to drive diversity, equity, and inclusion at Arts for Health, MK? What's the point, right? Why is it important to talk about it? Why is it important to put it on the agenda? Why is it important to have training courses and programs like this? What is the reason? Why do you think it's important? It would be great to hear your voices on this. I'll just double check. There's no questions or anything. Okay, great. Okay. Thank you so much for the contributions. They're coming through now, right? Because the communities we serve are very diverse, and that is just a fact, especially within Milton Keynes, right? We have such a diverse community. And I remember, when I was applying for jobs after graduation, I always used to say, almost like as my key line to get in an interview, or when I was in an interview, that I want to work for this organization because I want to be able to represent the diverse community that we serve, right? And it was so important for me to make sure that that representation was in the organization, because it gives knowledge, right? It gives understanding. It gives real life experiences that are applicable to the work that we do. And yes, the internet is full of resources that show you what other communities are experiencing, but there is that special kind of advantage that we have when we represent the diverse communities that we serve. We can share the same language, share the same culture, and that just gives us that special edge. So that's exactly why it's important. Adherence to the law, the Equality Act, harnessing diversity capital and ensuring we achieve our mission. It would be great if you can explain more what you mean by diversity capital, because it definitely does adhere to the law. The Equality Act 2010 outlines our anti-discrimination employment law, which states that it's illegal to discriminate on the grounds of our protected characteristics, which include our race, our gender, our sexual orientation, our religion, and the other 9 characteristics as well. But it would be great to hear more about what that diversity capital, what that means to you, if you don't mind putting that in the group chat. That's okay. Thank you for that comment. to enable everybody to achieve their maximum potential so that they can be fulfilled and the organization can be the best that it can be. Amazing. You know, that's kind of like what we see as the business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Why it's important, not only socially, but also economically, to have diversity and inclusion at the top of your agenda. Because by bringing a mixed bag of perspectives and thoughts and innovation into the room, we are achieving and touching so many different parts of our society. We can achieve our maximum potential as an organization, and we can be the best. So yes, amazing comment. Thank you for that. Because it is important that all people that feel that they would benefit from what we have to offer do have the confidence to contact us, as we are there for all those that need us. And that, again, amazing, links to this comment up here, right? That we need to demonstrate that we are serving, that we are capable and genuinely serving the communities that we say that we want to serve. A big part of that is having that visible diversity, but it's also having the understanding of different community groups as well. So amazing that, because having the confidence to contact us, I think that's a great way of putting it, because you can put the resource out there, but it doesn't mean that people feel safe enough to use it, or that they feel it's even for them, right? And we'll talk about that in a little bit more as well. And everyone feels able to access our services. Our services are responsive to the needs of the communities we serve. Their voices are represented and heard. And again, very, very important to make sure that you truly represent the community that you set out to serve. So amazing contributions on that. Thank you so much. Okay. So my answer, right, for why it's important to drive diversity, equity, and inclusion, why it's important to embrace diversity, is because of all the things that we get out from it, right? It's a huge benefit to organizations to embrace diversity because of the things that we get out of it. And this animation is supposed to be an animation. It never works with Mentimeter. I'm so sorry about that. But what this animation normally shows us, as it's getting filled up with color, because all the colors will go all the way to the top, the facial expression changes. It becomes this, it's not this sad face, it becomes happier, right? And the numbers increase to 100% as well. And it shows once a person can feel, 100% their authentic self, 100% who they are in an organization, in a space, right? They are able to provide so much more. They're able to give so much more of themselves once they feel safe enough to do so, right? Think about your colleagues, think about the people that you work with on a daily basis, and maybe start to assess, how much do I actually think I'm getting out of my colleagues? Could the reason be for that because they don't feel comfortable in this working environment? Could it be because they don't feel safe, right? And maybe they're only given 50%. And maybe that's something that we need to start thinking about. Because when our colleagues are only giving us 50%, we don't get the diversity of creativity that we need in our organization. We don't get their experiences from all over the world, because we know that skill sets are not just built at work, right? But they may hide parts of that away from us. They may not want to show us who they truly are because they don't feel safe enough to do so. So that means we don't get that innovative thoughts and practices. We don't get those, those moments of excellence that we could potentially get from our people if we just embrace diversity a little bit more. Okay. So that's my reason for why it's important to have these conversations. But again, there's so many benefits to an organization to have these conversations and to start practicing inclusivity, because we will then become and get an inclusive ecosystem. And when we use the word ecosystem, that is representative of all the aspects of that organization working together, supporting one another, and relying on each other. There's that healthy interdependence that happens in an inclusive workplace. And how would you know, right? You have a voice. You are able to say something and people pay attention to you. And this is not always guaranteeing that your ideas are going to make it to fruition, right? I'm not going to give you any of that guarantee, but I can guarantee that in an inclusive ecosystem, people pay attention to you, right? People feel as though you belong here and you feel like you belong here. When you step into those organization doors, or even when you're working remotely, when you sign in and let people know that you're online and you're available to talk to, you feel like you belong in this organization. I mean, you know, no one's perfect. So we all have those moments where we feel like we don't want to work or we don't want to do specific tasks or assignments, right? We're all human, but that's not the overall experience that you have at work, right? You feel happy to be there. Another hallmark of an inclusive ecosystem is that you feel unique. This is people recognizing that you are different and you are diverse, and that is okay. And your diversity leads to you being valued in this organization. It's a space where you can learn and develop and collaborate with people. You can ask people for help. It's safe enough for you to do that, right? An inclusive ecosystem also means that you have access to resources, that you can again grow and change and be in a space of continuous development because you have those accesses, right? And also in inclusive ecosystems, we would always recommend having something in black and white, having that inclusion strategy or that DE&I policy that all of us can become accountable towards, right? That we have put our foot down, that we are anti-racist, anti-sexist, that we are anti-ableist, which is discrimination towards people with disabilities. And we let everybody know that this is an environment where you can feel safe, right? So those are those are the hallmarks, the key aspects of what an inclusive ecosystem is. So we've spoken a lot around inclusion, right? What is exclusion? And even as I said the word, I'm pretty sure all of us have had a memory or thought or an incident where we felt excluded, right? And it means those interactions with other people that make us feel as if we are invisible or we've been left out or we've been forgotten about. And maybe most of our experiences could be social, but imagine professional exclusion, right? Imagine coming into the workplace and feeling as if nobody wants you there, that you don't belong there, that you're not valued, that you're not respected, right? That is what exclusion means. And that is what we're trying to get away from. So throughout the 9 years that I've been doing this, we always ask participants, why have you felt excluded? What was happening at the time that made you feel the way you feel? And here are a group or a list of reasons as to why people have felt excluded over the years. We've got things like an accent, right? So coming from a place where you're new to where your location is and you have a very visible accent that is different from the majority of people, and they could be potentially the source of banter. There could be people don't think that they're capable of doing the work because they're not from the place that everybody else is from, right? Accent can really have a big impact on whether someone chooses to speak out or not, right? Imagine always being asked to repeat yourself because people are not paying attention to you intensely, or people don't care to be patient enough to listen to what you have to say because your accent is different, right? So that's one area. Another area, disability, right? There's a lot of biases that are attached to people with disabilities where straight away someone thinks that you're incapable of doing a certain task or a project and is already trying to figure out a way to mitigate you in certain scenarios. And I've heard that again and again throughout the various people I've spoken to throughout the years. So there's many reasons, absolutely many reasons as to why people have felt excluded in organizations. And I want to ask you the question as well. Have you ever felt excluded at Arts for Health MK or any organization that you have worked for throughout your working years? And is that something you'd be willing to share with us as well? It would be great to hear your thoughts on this. Have you ever felt excluded at your organization? And it could be in any way that you experience exclusion. It's definitely a very subjective question. So it'll be great to see your thoughts on this. Have you ever felt excluded at your organization? Okay, so we've got them coming in. So we do have one no and one yes. So already on equal standing, there are people within this room that have felt excluded at either Arts for Health MK or any organization they've been through. So we have sometimes as well. So there's some people in the space that sometimes feel excluded at Arts for Health MK or another organization. But strongly we have no as well. So there are some people who feel included at all times, which is great, really great to see and hear as well. And then the next question is for those of us who have said yes or sometimes, right? We want to hear your thoughts. We want to hear your experiences. If you wouldn't mind sharing with us, why have you felt excluded? And as you could see before on the previous page, there's so many reasons as to why somebody will feel excluded. It could be a temporary exclusion, it could be a permanent one, it could be one that they felt from the moment they walked into the organization, or it could be one that happened once they had a life change themselves, right? Um, why have you felt excluded? It would be really great to hear from those three people that identified yes or sometimes. And please let me know if anybody's had any questions or anything at this point. I hope everyone's enjoying the session as well. Okay. Okay. So we have one response, right? So far, anyway. Why have you felt excluded? Having very different qualifications and professional experiences compared to other team members and can sometimes lead to feeling excluded. And that's one area as well that I think doesn't often get spoken about that much, which is that, sometimes we can professionally exclude others because of the qualifications we have and the experiences we have. We may think that, I guess, we're better than other people, and that definitely leads to exclusion. It shows up in our mannerism, in our tone of voice, in our behavior, in our facial expressions. It really shows up in those areas. So it may be something that you're not aware of, but everybody else definitely is, right? So thank you so much for that contribution. Working parent, not available at certain times, not able to travel overnight. And this, I'm not a parent, but it's definitely something I empathize with. My brother is a parent of a nearly 6-year-old, and his life had to completely change after he had his son. Understanding that you can't always be available as much as you want to really get there and do the things, you may not be able to because your priorities are in other areas. So definitely a reason why you would feel excluded. And unfair expectations, right? 100%, right? Having expectations set off you because maybe people are thinking of you as a stereotype or have an assumption based on your cultural background. That can be one reason. Or these unfair expectations that have never been verbalized between manager and worker, right? You never said that this is what you wanted from me. And now, because I'm not meeting those expectations, I'm being excluded. I'm not being maybe invited out for after work drinks, or I'm being excluded from emails, right? It can show up in many different ways. So thank you so much for sharing with us your experiences. But it just goes to show that there are people in this space with us right now who have those experiences of exclusion, right? Even makes it more, it makes it even more important as to why we need to continue having these discussions. So we're going to step out of our individual selves right now. We're going to think about Arts for Health MK. And I'm in the next question I've got kind of the question of where do you think your organization is on the good diversity practice maturity matrix, which is this simplified, it's a simplified one on the screen right here. And what this is a very kind of surface way of examining your organization through DE&I methods and practices and initiatives. I say it's a surface level way because the larger audit that can be done is called the GDEIB. So this is the global index and benchmark for DE&I. And this is what has been taken from that global index. So that's a lot bigger. This is a smaller version of it. So as I go through what each of these levels mean, it'll be great if you can let me know on the next question where you think your Arts for Health MK sits on this matrix. So the first one we have is inactive, right? No DE&I work has started, no diversity talks, no training courses, nothing, right? We're very much in a space of inactivity. Or are we reactive? We have a compliance mindset, which means we understand the Equality Act 2010. We understand how not to discriminate against people, but that's where we are at. We are not really trying to learn or change or grow in any other way. Or are we proactive, right? Are we starting to have the discussions, even if they're uncomfortable? And we'll come on to that in a little bit more detail in a moment. But we are starting to have a clear awareness of the value of having these discussions around diversity and inclusion, and we're starting to implement it. Maybe we are developing our inclusion strategy. Maybe we have a champion in place that can start to really make changes within our organization, right? So we're on the way, we're starting. Or are we progressive, right? Have we been doing DE&I work and now we are implementing our DE&I strategy systematically? We've already started to show results and we can already start to plan for the future. Is that where we are? Or are we at best practice, right? We can demonstrate to other organizations how to become an inclusive organization. Here at Arts for Health MK, we have been doing it for many years, right? And we have begun to be a shining example to other organizations about how to do this, right? So where do you think Arts for Health MK currently sits on that scale? Are we inactive, reactive, proactive, progressive, or are we at best practice, right? Where do you think we're at? Okay, so we've got slam bank in the middle, proactive, right? A lot more coming through proactive, which is great, which means that we're starting to have the conversations. We're starting to really think about what can DE&I look like for our organization. So that's great. Okay, really, really good. Really, really good. Thank you so much for these. Okay, good. So I can see that we're all on the same page here. We all believe that we are proactive at Arts for Health MK. Great. So we've discussed, hopefully we've all come to a common understanding now about where we currently are, our current understanding and thought process around inclusion. And now we're going to start talking about what are the barriers to inclusion? What can be potentially going on that is causing us, to not progress in this area as much as we would like to? And I'm going to bring it back to you, right? And I want you to think about yourself within Arts for Health MK and think about your work that you do with Arts for Health MK and ask yourself the question, how much of your authentic self do you think you bring to Arts for Health MK, right? And I define authentic self and authenticity as being able to show up in your race, your gender, your religion, right? Your sexual orientation, your ability or disability. So being able to show up in these spaces without masking and hiding who you are and not being able to truly, share your opinions and you don't feel valued, all these other experiences that really define for me what authentic self is. And we use numbers to kind of ascertain where we think we are. But again, we may understand that these are not absolute. So you may feel 80% on some days, 100% on another day, but just as an average, how much of your authentic self do you think you bring to Arts for Health MK? So it'd be really good to see these. Amazing. Okay, so we've got like a varied number here, which is really interesting. Got some quite high-end ones with 2 at 90, 1 at 100%, and we have some quite in the middle. Thankfully, nobody yet has selected under 50% or just 50%. So we definitely have some themes of inclusion here. But I would like to just ask another question attached to that, right? For those of us who did not select 100%, right? So everybody but one. Why are you not able to be your 100% authentic self? What was stopping you from selecting 100%, right? What went through your mind that made you think, actually, no, I am at 60% or 70%. Why not 100? What are the barriers for you to be 100%? And it may not really be a bad barrier. You may have the reasoning that you just want to keep some of yourself to yourself, right? There's some areas you like to share professionally and there's some areas you don't. 100% valid. It will just be great to see that on screen if you can share with us. And I hope everyone's enjoying the session. I know this is a lot of me talking at you, but I'm really grateful for everyone contributing via Mentimeter. It's a great way for us to interact. Okay. So we've got a couple of responses already. Thank you so much. Because some aspects of self are private, yeah, which is what I said. I think that's 100% valid, right? You may not want to show all of yourselves to your colleagues, to other professionals. You just want to be able to keep some of yourself private. there is always an element of appropriately playing a professional role, which is true. Again, you may just want to keep some things professional, and that's the reason why you didn't select 100%. Other professional distractions. Wow, that's an interesting one. Would you be able to sorry, I have a call coming through. Would you be able to define that a little bit more in the group chat? What does other professional distractions mean? Does that mean that maybe you just want to, I don't know, actually, let me not speak for you, right? Would you be able to talk about that in a bit more detail? And then we've got another comment here that says, it's just me. I am genuinely self-conscious, so it would always be less than 100%. And that, again, I 100% understand. I would just want you to think, though, a little bit for those who made that comment. Do you think that your self-consciousness is from you, or is it from the people around you? Because would you always say that maybe you're self-conscious around the people that you feel safe around? Just a food for thought question for you. And not feeling able to give as much time as I would like. Also confidence and mental health. Again, very valid points, right? Things that can impact how much of ourselves we bring to spaces. Not feeling able to as well is something I definitely have experience in. So these are all valid responses. Thank you so much for that. Okay. So let's carry on with the session. What are our barriers to inclusion? So 100% could be because we don't feel safe in the environment. But statistically, we know that there are most affected groups when we think about our diversity dimensions, right? And just to quickly go through them, these are some of the dimensions of diversity. So how we measure diversity in our social standing currently. And these are the most affected groups within that dimension of diversity. So when we start having discussions around gender in an organization, for example, we're majority talking about how can we include women within our discussions, right? Within our industries, especially industries that are still very male dominated, right? How can we make it a safe space for women? How can we encourage growth for women, especially to get to those top levels as well within the organization? So kind of follows the same theme throughout the rest of these examples, which is the dimension of diversity and the most commonly affected groups within that as well. The most common in the workplace, right? And these definitely have been collected throughout my years of speaking with organizations and having these type of discussions and hearing feedback from people, that these are the most common barriers to inclusion within our organizations. And the first one is the culture of the organization itself. And my definition of organizational culture are the things that we accept, tolerate, and challenge, right? How we treat each other, right, always comes with a consequence, right? How we greet each other, what we do for one another in our organizations always comes with a consequence, whether it's positive or negative. So if somebody's done an action, it's now up to the rest of us to determine whether that's something we are going to accept, tolerate, or challenge within our organization. And then that starts to form our culture. Say if we see somebody be harassed, bullied, right, and we let it happen, that can be an indication that that is part of our culture because we've let it happen, we've tolerated it, we've accepted it, right? And sometimes the culture that we put on our websites, that we put on our social media, right, our aesthetic, our branding, could really be different from how the people that work in the organization experience it, right? And that's what we call our explicit or hidden or shadow culture, the reality of how things actually go on in the organization. It's saying, on your website that we are anti-racist, but when we talk to your minority ethnic staff, they say that that is not the case and that this organization is racist, right? So that's an example of those two aspects. Institutional or structural or systemic discrimination, all kind of the same term, all essentially mean that the discrimination that is an offset of that organization is inbuilt into the structure of that organization. When I use the term systemic or structural discrimination, we mean the bones of the organization, the policies, the processes that may not change even if all the people in the organization change, right? And when something is inbuilt into the process of an organization, it can begin to structurally discriminate against a group, a marginalized group, a community group, again and again and again, because it's inbuilt into our process. Maybe the first time that we outlined what the process or the approach or the policy would be, we didn't think about how it would impact, people from different types of cultures, different walks of lives. One example during the school, for schools and the policy within school was that students weren't allowed to have big hair. They weren't allowed to have certain types of hair types that were linked to African communities and Caribbean communities, saying that somebody is not allowed an afro or certain types of locks or braids started to become, or has always been, but definitely an awareness of it being discriminative started to really become apparent, because these are linked to people's cultures. So by saying a specific hairstyle is not allowed or not deemed respectable or should not be allowed in our spaces without properly consulting whether it's appropriate across all cultures, when it becomes inbuilt into our process, into our rules, right? That's when it starts to become systemic and structural and institutional, right? So that's an example of that. Please let me know if you have any questions whatsoever. Then another common barrier to inclusion is everyday discrimination. And everyday discrimination is seen as microaggressions and micro incivilities, and maybe the things that have happened, but you may not be able to really put it in a sentence or be able to really describe to other people what has happened. But internally, that you may have just been a victim of discrimination, right? This includes banter, right? And banter is such a controversial term, especially when we talk about organizations, because banter helps to build relationships and cohesiveness within companies and organizations, which is true. But it also can have underlying aspects of bullying, of discrimination, of hate speech sometimes as well, if we don't challenge it. So that's why we've included that in there. And also the inability to have uncomfortable conversations is also part of everyday discrimination. Because say, for example, you've been or you're about to be corrected on some language that you've used that's now outdated or inappropriate for the group that you are around, right? And someone tries to address that with you, but you are unable to have that conversation. Either you become very defensive, become very deflective. There's another term in our industry that's called fragility, which is then reacting quite emotional and maybe having an expressive or distressive reaction towards somebody correcting you on your behavior. This shows that you are unable to have uncomfortable conversations around change. And that is definitely a barrier to inclusion, right? Two areas that I'm definitely going to go into more detail in is unconscious bias and lack of psychological safety as huge barriers to inclusion. And unconscious bias is our unintentional preferences, our unintentional preferences of people, of cultures, of food, of music, of clothes, like absolutely everything, right? Because we all have preferences. But where biases come in is something that happens without us realizing that it's happening, right? Which is why people say it's unconscious. But there are arguments that it's both unconscious and conscious bias that we all operate in, right? But definitely within our unconscious biases, we have made decisions already about who we like and who we don't like, right? We've already placed people into groups based on our experiences. And if the people that we put in our in group, right, the people that we like, we tend to make more effort for, we tend to do more for, pay attention to more, as opposed to people in our out groups who we don't really like that much. So we don't pay attention to them at all. We don't do the same things for them. There's no real effort in that area, right, in that space. And our unconscious bias stems from an automatic decision-making process. It's linked to psychology, which states that in our system one, there's two systems, right? And in our system one way of thinking, it's very quick, it's very fast and emotional sometimes, how we can make a reaction or make a decision or something, or say something really quickly without thinking about it, right? That's where you get that term, oh, I didn't really think about what I said before I said it, because it's very, very quick. almost based on muscle memory, right? You know, when you go to somewhere that you go often, whether that's your local supermarket or maybe your friends or family's houses, you kind of know how to get there already. You may not need a sat nav or directions. Maybe you just kind of get into your car and you arrive at your destination without really thinking about it, right? That's using your system one way of thinking. That's where unconscious bias sits. It's very quick, very, very fast. But we want you to be thinking from your system two, right? And this is slower. This is when you have a new destination that you need to go to. So you have to put it in the map. You have to pay attention to where you're driving, right? You have to maybe look at the signs or get your GPS out because you need to be paying attention. You need to be conscious, right? And this is where we get conscious inclusion from. Paying attention to the people around you, not making any assumptions about who you think they are, not acting off a stereotype, and challenging yourself if you see that you have any kind of negative behavior or language or tone or facial expression, right, towards other people. When you think slower, when you think more consciously, you're able to recognize these things as it happens. So I've got a video for you. Hopefully I clicked that little thing that said sound. Please let me know if you can hear this. Or if you can't hear it, I guess. Just very quick.
What would the world look like if everybody were aware of the stereotypes that they have and the biases that they have? When we talk about unconscious bias, we're basically saying our worldview can actually exert an influence beyond our conscious awareness, and it creates ambiguity.
If you go to an engineer who's built something extremely innovative, and you say, who do you think your user is? This is where I have the most fun. My name is TB Raman, and I led our work on Android accessibility for 3 years. Write down everything that you think you know about your user with respect to abilities, inabilities, special abilities, disabilities. Almost every assumption that you write down on that whiteboard about this is the user I think I'm building for is questionable, because our various unconscious biases define the boundaries you're unwilling to expand.
These biases, they're the shortcuts that our brain has created so that we can deal with the information that we process every single day.
Right when we see anyone, whether we think about it or not, we are implicitly, automatically making judgments about how warm and competent that person or thing is.
All humans need to make decisions. And so we fill in the blanks because our brains are wired to do that. And we fill in with things we don't know with, past experience. Oh, you pattern map to someone I think I should hire. So I'm going to hire you versus this person because they didn't map, because I can't fill in the blank because they don't look like me or they're not from my same background. And so I can't see how they're going to make the jump.
Every single person is great at things that you may not expect them to be, but it's really hard for us to see that when we're so powerfully guided by the things we expect to be true in the world.
I grew up surrounded with this conversation about what you can't do and what you won't be able to do. My name's Enrico, and I'm an autistic software engineer. The first time I go through the performance review process, I was asked for 5 strengths. It was the first time that I had ever been prompted to think in that way about myself, and it was really a life-changing moment for me.
When we are working in our day-to-day jobs, we are still making judgments about the people around us, about the resumes we see, about the employees that we're trying to decide, whether to put them on teams or not.
People are very wedded to the idea that they can perceive something objectively, and statistically they're wrong, but it's hard. You become attached to this idea that you can assess something by looking at it.
These subtle assumptions we make about people can have lasting effects on who we're promoting, who we're hiring, who we're putting in leadership positions. We have the responsibility to understand the assumptions that we make and understand the errors that we make.
But it's not just for the collective good. If you take the time to understand more about this, there are things that you can implement for yourself that'll help you develop as a leader and to do your job even better.
It made me realize how often I have a very strong belief that is simply incorrect. When I look at one of these evaluation situations, the first question is, how can I eliminate the sources of potential bias and leave just the data so we can actually make better decisions?
If you're not conscious of the biases that you have, you're just not contributing at the level that you could, and you're not innovating at the level you could. And so your products won't be as good. Your results won't be as good.
When you think outside the box with respect to the assumptions you made about how somebody would use this wonderful thing you built, and when you sort of broaden that perspective as to who you change the world for, you build something even bigger.
Okay. An amazing video. I love watching this video and playing this video for my sessions because it really just drives home just how much we need to be on our toes thinking about the things that we think we already know, especially around other people, and allow ourselves to be challenged, right? Especially when we think about unconscious bias. And I just want to give us some examples of unconscious bias to start get our mind thinking, right? To start thinking about our own behaviors. So first example is the bias called affinity bias. And this is probably the one that we all act out in. And I would say, you know, just verbatim that we all have instances of unconscious bias, right? We all do. And affinity bias is this tendency to more easily and deeply connect with people who look and feel like ourselves. So not just our visible similarities, but if we share the same type of music, if we like the same type of food, if we are travelers or not travelers, you know, all of those kind of subculture groups, we tend to, you know, liken ourselves to people that are like us. It's just human nature. Another unconscious bias is in-group favoritism. And this is when we tend to favor members of in-groups and neglect members of out-groups, right? This is when we've decided that, okay, you know, a celebrity can do no wrong, right? Because they are members of an in-group and the rest of us are members of out-groups, right? So when we decide to treat celebrities more favorably, that's an example of our in-group favoritism, right? Another one is called the halo effect. And this occurs when we assume that people are good at doing one thing, that they must be good at doing other things as well, right? And this at first seems like a very good thing, but sometimes the person that is the victim of the halo effect doesn't get enough support. Nobody asks them if they're okay, because everybody thinks that they're the strong friend, if we know what that means, right? The strong person rarely ever get asked if they need any help. And that's an example of the halo effect. Another one, especially within our working places, is name bias. And this is when we have the tendency to judge and prefer people with certain types of names, right? This particular bias is why processes such as inclusive recruitment has become much more popular around organizations, right? This is when we don't really collect information, any personal information about potential candidates, because we're realizing that knowing their name or knowing their gender, even knowing their location, can really impact whether we select them for an interview or not, right? So these biases really have huge impacts on our working environment, especially prove it again bias. And this is when it makes people feel as though they have to prove themselves again and again and again across their career, because nobody takes them seriously, whether it's because of their gender, of their sexual orientation, of their race, but they always feel that they have to be working 120% just to prove that they belong here, they deserve to be here, right? So these are some types of unconscious bias. And the next question I have for you is, how do you think our unconscious bias, because again, we all have them, right, impact how we serve the community? How do you think that does? If we've spoken about the reality that we all have unconscious bias, that it could be about race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, right, can really impact how we see each other, whether we're going to make assumptions or go off stereotypes that can impact our behavior, right? But how does our unconscious bias impact how we serve the community here at Arts for Health MK? So it'd be great to hear your thoughts on that. Okay. Just keeping an eye on time as well. We have about 25 minutes left of the session, so I definitely want to utilize that well. But it'd be really great to hear your thoughts on this. Okay, thank you for that first contribution. So how does our unconscious bias impact how we serve the community? We might make unhelpful assumptions about certain characteristics or communities, and that's very true, right? If we think about the media that we consumed as we were developing, as even now, some of the media that we consume has harmful stereotypes, has harmful assumptions that may have really sifted into our thinking. And if we don't challenge those, it may begin to impact the communities that we serve, because we have some assumptions around these communities that have not actually been realized, right? May not actually be true. One example I have about this is I worked with an organization, and it was with all the senior leadership team, all the execs that I was having the session with, and we were talking about unconscious bias. And there was another video that I played for them, which showed this woman with a hijab explaining what stereotypes have impacted her and her working career, throughout. Let me actually, so you can see my face. Let me come back in. Hi. So she was explaining about how her experiences of being at work, being a woman that wears a hijab. And after I played this video, I asked the participants, how did you feel about that? How did that make you feel? One in particular came to me and she said, that was a stereotype that I had until now, until this moment, that I had around women that wear hijabs. And her understanding of women that wear hijabs was that they were controlled by their husbands, that they didn't have autonomy over themselves, that they weren't able to make their own decisions, that they were just controlled by this kind of patriarchal system that they were in, right? And it was until that moment that she saw that video of this woman who had a career, had autonomy of self, but wearing a hijab, did she finally start to challenge that thought and that stereotype that she had in her mind. But then I asked her another question. I said, do you think that stereotype or that assumption that you had around women with hijabs have impacted, your experiences as a leader, as a worker, as a manager? And she says 100%. I would have never given an opportunity to a woman that wore a hijab if I saw her in an interview, if I was having a conversation with her, putting her on a project team. I wouldn't have done it because I didn't think that they were capable of doing that kind of job, right? This is from someone who's in senior leadership, who has that decision-making power, who openly said, and rightfully so, because we all need to learn and change and grow, that this is an unconscious bias that she had that had never been challenged until that moment. So even though she couldn't, categorically remember if there had been a specific woman that she had discriminated against, but because she was so sure of how much she believed that statement, she knows she would have acted out in a certain type of way, right? And that's why it's so important to become much more aware of our unconscious bias. So let me just share again, and let's see what all of our experiences were saying. But that's a really good food for thought. It always stays with me, that scenario, always stays with me, right? So how does unconscious bias impact how we serve the community? We do not supply the optimal solution for the whole of the community. Essentially, that is what it is, right? If we don't ask the right questions or get the right people in the room, we may not be doing the best that we can do. We may not be providing the best solution for the whole of the community. I have no evidence for this so far, but could see that stereotypes about people with mental health problems could lead us to conclude that their evaluations of our services are not to be trusted. And that is so key that you said this, right? Because our stereotypes around people could be that, they're not trusted, they live their life in a certain way. That could impact how we even view their own statements about us, right? Their feedback about us, we could just discard it so easily because we think that they are not capable of making a good evaluation, right? Great point. We might inadvertently exclude certain groups through the policies and processes in place, and 100%, right? I mean, I haven't read all of your policies, right? But I know that even in just the language that we choose, for example, we could be excluding certain people who may not feel that this policy is for them. And we may not offer the right support to the right people. So very much assuming people are coping or have a particular problem that they don't, right? And that is so key as well. If we're not asking the right questions, we're not making sure that we have covered all of our bases, what we are doing could be potentially more damaging than helpful, right? So really thankful for those contributions. And specifically when serving the community, our biases can manifest in various ways. Again, like many of you have said, we could be acting off assumptions and stereotypes, which is just not helpful to the end user, right? We could be given unequal access of services. which is where we treat one community group better than another community group because there's just that, that stereotype that we are holding on to. So we're not treating people the same. We're not treating people fairly. We could be acting out microaggressions and micro incivilities, which are the subtle actions that we make towards people to let them know that you're not in my in group, right? Essentially, I don't like you. Even if it may be something that is small to you, it could be huge to the person who is receiving it, right? Another way biases manifest is in our unfair decision making. We could be treating certain people within our colleagues in a different way to others, giving people better treatment than others, right? We can definitely be acting in this way. A lack of effective and empathetic communication and engagement, lack of representation and visibility, right? So many areas that our biases can be manifesting, especially when we're serving the community, if we don't challenge it, right? So that's a huge barrier to inclusion. Another barrier to inclusion is the lack of psychological safety, also known as mental safety, right? And when there's a lack of psychological safety or mental safety in an organization, it fosters an environment where people are afraid, right? And I always like to emphasize that word afraid, because feeling afraid to come to work is a terrible, terrible experience, right? You can feel maybe you're fed up, you don't really want to work on a certain project, maybe you're just not comfortable in your personal life right now, you would rather stay at home, but being afraid to bring yourself to work, to come to work in who you are, is a terrible experience. And this is what a lack of psychological safety can do, right? It can increase anxiety around failing and falling behind, which encourages people to keep their struggles to themselves, right? Imagine your colleague is struggling with a particular task and they can't ask for help because they don't feel safe enough to do so, right? There is high staff turnover due to highly pressured working environments. And whilst everybody may put in their CV that they can work in pressured working environments, there is a level of pressure where anybody will begin to say, I can't do this and I won't do this, right? A lack of psychological safety leads to low motivation, no innovation, low creativity, and less risk taking, which we know can really build an organization up, right? And it starts to foster a culture of blame and bullying and discrimination and harassment in an organization, which would just ultimately lead to exclusion, right? If there is a culture of bullying in an organization, that means it's happened more than once, nothing was done about it, right? Which is not what we want. A lack of psychological safety is a huge, huge barrier to inclusion. And the snowball effect that this has, right? Once it's already been established that there's no psychological safety here in this team, in this department, in this organization, it can only lead to more and more issues for the organization, right? So this is very, very important to work on. Okay, so those were all the barriers, which is, it definitely puts a little bit of a dampener on our conversation, but it's so important to have, right? It's part of the reason why we need to talk about these so that we can start to become a lot more aware of the change or any changes that we need to make. So let's start talking about that, right? What can we do to change? What can we do to do better? Or what can we be doing more of the things that we are already doing? So let me be here to reassure you that you are doing some great things already. So let's continue doing more of it, right? One of my final questions for you for the session: what can you do, right, to serve communities better? We've already spoken about having that foundation of knowledge. What does equity mean? Inclusion mean? What does it look like? What does it feel like, right? We've spoken about the barriers as well. What could I be doing that is causing a barrier to inclusion here? But now I'm asking you the question, what can you do to serve communities better? Right? And someone like me who also works in the community, also works with people, I always think about my reactions. I'm always thinking about, did I react in an appropriate way to the question, to the query? What was my body language like? What was my facial expression like when that person asked me a question? And it is part of being self-aware, but it's also about becoming more socially considerate and understanding what responsibility you have in society, right? So that's where I'm at. That's what I can do to better serve my community. Be a lot more aware of my reactions. But what can you do, right? Really want to hear your contributions to this question. have been talking a lot as well, so I hope that the session is going well for everyone. I'm drinking so much tea in the background, like you wouldn't even believe. Okay. Okay, I love this. I love this straight away to understand and embrace as much as possible the needs and diversity of the community. 100%, right? Have that understanding and understand and embrace as well the things that you don't know yet. I think that's one of the beauty about humanity that we've lost a little bit. We all feel that we know everything already, and that kind of discovery, exploration, kind of desire needs to come back. We need to be willing to explore again, explore each other, be curious about each other, right? I understand that some things are personal and needs to stay personal, but how curious, how healthily curious, let me say it like that, are we about other people? Because that's really going to drive our need to understand the community a lot better, right? Something around embedding reflective practice into the organization's culture. That is amazing. And this is something I've definitely been speaking more about when people are making decisions. I think there's a term called the equity matrix, which is when you're making a decision that is for a large amount of people, you have to go through all the diversity dimensions, for example, and think about, does this policy, will this work for someone with a disability? Will this work for someone with ADHD and dyslexia? Will this work for someone for people with different cultures and different religions, right? You go through this equity matrix to make sure your decision making is inclusive, right? So that's definitely something we can start embedding. Look at the demographic profile of those who use our services and consider who does well here and who does not. And 100%, let's create more data around inclusion, because that is a key way of doing that. I think that's an amazing way of doing that as well. Looking at our demographic profile and see who uses our services. Amazing. See if you need to tailor more your language towards one group as opposed to another. There's so many things. Oh my God. Sorry, I'm getting so many calls today. Today's my birthday. I've turned 30 today, so I'm literally getting call after call after call. It's getting a bit much. Drive more proactively the EDI agenda in our organization. 100%, we can become champions, right, in our own organization around DE&I. I am definitely that person that people know they can't really share inappropriate jokes with me or inappropriate statements, because I will be the champion and let people know, and correct them if needed, challenge them if needed, be that person as well, right? Really listen to what their needs are, checking with the communities and each other that we are reacting to realities, not assumptions or biases. Keep working, not being afraid to get things wrong. Amazing. I don't even have anything to add. Keep working, not be afraid to get things wrong. That is exactly where we need to be. Be more aware of and challenge my own unconscious biases. Perfect. Be proactive in ensuring those communities who are underrepresented across our services feel more confident and able to access them. That is it, right? Let's have more discussions. Let's talk. Let's challenge ourselves, right? Let's really think about, how am I holding myself back from being inclusive? Right? So let's carry on. Thank you so much for these contributions. Just being aware of time, we just have just under 15 minutes left. But let's discuss some solutions, right? And a huge part of the solutions to change or how to become more inclusive is all around understanding more, learning, relearning, unlearning, right? All these terms that definitely describe becoming more educated in these areas. And some of the ways that we do that is making sure we get the language right? And I've heard a lot of organizations use these two terms to describe maybe the same thing is what they're trying to get to, but I definitely want to make sure that we get the language right for Arts for Health MK. So positive action versus positive discrimination. Both strategies to address inequality and both strategies can promote diversity and inclusion. I just think it's important to know which each one is, right? And how we can utilize each one effectively. And positive action refers to proactive measures, right? So this is intentional measures and actions and initiatives such as outreach events, going to recruitment centers or job fairs and targeting specific groups, right? Offering training courses, mentorship schemes, right? Doing a lot of things which kind of predates people even applying for the job, right? say if we see that there's a lack of people with visible disabilities in our specific organization, what we actually need to do is, before even putting on our job description that we welcome applications from all people with disabilities and being a disability champion, is actually making sure that we are going beyond that first, maybe going to schools, maybe going to community centers that definitely cater for the community group that you're trying to target, and doing something there, doing an outreach event there, letting people know that you care beyond just what's in it for your organization, right? That's what positive action is about. Realizing that actually you can close the gap between a certain community group getting more advice and more support and more insight into a particular industry or group, just because you went beyond the interview stage, right? The focus is on providing opportunities and support, right? That's what positive action is. Whereas positive discrimination actually involves giving preferential treatments to people based on their membership to a particular group. So this is when we go back to almost doing tokenistic things, right? Tick box exercises, when we're just selecting a person because of who they are, right? And even though it may be giving them an opportunity and giving them the job or whatever it may be, positive discrimination involves decisions that favor certain groups over others. So essentially, it's still discrimination. Even if you may be doing it with the right intentions, it doesn't mean it's going to work out for the person that you are choosing, right? Because again, diversity can be present. You can bring somebody in because of positive discrimination, realizing you don't have a Black woman on your team, so let me select a Black woman, right? But when she gets into the organization, she may just be forgotten about, left alone, ignored, and excluded, which is what positive discrimination can sometimes lead to, right? So we would rather organizations get involved in positive action and start to go beyond just their recruitment strategies in order to spread interest into their industries, right? So those are the main differences. But it is really a lot about learning and unlearning and relearning, and making sure you got the right terminology, making sure you know what people are talking about. And one area that we definitely like to touch upon within our sessions as something to relearn is our understanding around gender and gender pronouns, right? Because this is definitely something that is spoken a lot about in our society now. A lot of organizations are definitely paying more attention to it. And just to talk about it a little bit so that we all know what these terms mean, right? So a pronoun is a word that refers to either the people talking, so you and I, or something or someone, sorry, that is being talked about. So this is when we start to use the pronoun she, he, her, they, them, right? We have always used gender pronouns. It's always been in the English language, especially when we are talking to somebody else or referring somebody else to another person, right? It is part of our gender expression. It always has been. What's happening now in our current times is our expansion of gender identity. We are starting to understand that people identify themselves differently in our society, and here, as in the UK, we do accept that. We do want to recognize people for how they want to be identified. So talking to someone in an appropriate gender pronoun is part of respectful communication in 2024, right? It's being able to say, I see you for who you say you are. I'm not trying to put my assumption of what gender identity should be on you. I accept you for who you are, right? And when we think about in our organizations, it's purely part of respectful communication. And here in this yellow box here, is many examples of gender pronouns. This is not an exhaustive list. I would say this is a very short list, especially now with like the rise of this being spoken a lot about on social media. I would say a lot of this list is, this is a very small list, sorry. But the most common ones we're hearing about more is they, them, which is the gender identity of duality, of plurality, sorry, which is where a person sees themselves as either male and female, male fluid with female. I mean, there's a lot of different gender identities. It can also be a transgender individual as well, so somebody who is transitioning between male and female. So these terms really are part of respectful communication. So this is just something for you to learn about. You can definitely ask me any questions that you have about this, but we always find it helpful to just speak about something new, and this is definitely something new. Okay. One of the major ways that we can make change is committing to becoming an ally, right? When we think about the term ally, we really do think about being a supportive person, being a supportive friend, being a supportive colleague, someone who has the desire to be anti-racist and anti-sexist, not just non-racist or non-sexist, right? But genuinely wants to put their foot down around any inappropriate comments or language or terms being used around so many different things. Being an ally is someone who has the willingness to educate themselves, right? So do what we did today, have conversations, right? Talk about different people's experiences. It's about challenging our own discomfort and prejudices. And like somebody said earlier, actually finding out what unconscious biases do I have. There's loads of tools online that you can use to help this part, which is one of the tools is an implicit bias test, Harvard's implicit bias test, which is a scientifically controlled test around your biases. Definitely use that as a starting place. But another place would be just to ask your friends and families, how do I react, right? When somebody of a different culture, community, or religion or sexual orientation comes around me, do I change my behavior? Do I change my facial expression? Do I completely shut down? Ask the people, get to know more about yourself, right? And challenge yourself. Acknowledge your own privilege and utilize it proactively. And privilege to me is a state of awareness, right? When we recognize and acknowledge what our privileges are, we can then become better allies by saying, okay, I have a voice in this place where somebody else doesn't have a voice. I have credibility here where somebody else doesn't have a credibility. Let me stand up for others, right? That's what utilizing your privilege proactively means. A person who wants to be an ally is open to self-reflection, right? You're open to changes. And just by you being here in the session today already proves to me that you are, right? And you take action, right? Being an ally is not like a surface level word. It has meaning. It has depth. So when you say that you're an ally, we want to see that you are an ally, okay? So I have a scale here just for us to get our minds thinking about where we are now, where we want to be. We are kind of running out of time, so I hope that you can still stay with me for a couple more minutes. It's on Mentimeter, so both of the last questions are, where do you want to be on this allyship scale? And I'm going to go through it. Or you can just pull it in the group chat if you did have to leave. But let me go through it really quickly, right? On this scale, we have passiveness, which is no awareness, no action. You essentially don't really care. You're not really in care yet. Or you're a bystander, which is that you have the awareness of what's going on, but you're not really doing anything about it. Or are you a performative ally? So this is someone who does the actions. Maybe you retweet stuff, you like stuff, you share stuff, but you don't really care. It's not really coming from a genuine place. It's more so coming from social approval. You don't want to be seen to not doing something, right? Or are you an active ally? Are you learning now, unlearning now, relearning, having uncomfortable discussions for change? Or are you proactive? Have you already been doing all the learning and now you're growing? Now you're growing in knowledge and you have more awareness and you have empathy because you're doing the work. Or do you see yourself as an upstander, right? You're committed to change. You would stand up for anybody when it's needed, right? Because you want to eradicate systemic inequality for all people. Where would you say you are currently on this scale? And again, we haven't had that long in this area, so please take it with a little bit of salt as you're answering this. And it could be in relation to different diversity dimensions. You may think, you're an upstander as an ally in gender, but you're very passive as an ally in disability. So you can definitely play around with the scale as much as you can. But it'd be really great to know, where are you on the allyship scale and where would you like to be? Yeah. So I'll leave you with that at the moment. As we round up, because we are due to finish at 1:15, definitely don't want to take more of your time than needed. Thank you, Tanya, for the happy birthday. Really appreciate that. Honestly, my phone has been going off this whole hour. So that's really good. But yeah, this whole discussion has been really great for me. Thank you, Benjamin, for the clap. That's really cool. It's been really good for me I know I've been talking a lot at you. We didn't have a lot of time for that, but I hope the Mentimeter helped with the interaction. Thank you so much for all the contributions. And really, it will be really great to hear maybe just one word from everybody about what you're taking from the session or what you've learned or how you feel, right? One word, and then we can close there. Ben, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, thanks very much, Hannah. Really great hour chatting to you electronically and listening to what you have to say on the subject. I'm quite amazed that we managed to get through so much that we did, and well done. I guess my word I would contribute right now is curious.
Amazing. So the door's open, I'm hoping.
The door's open, yeah. The door's open.
Yeah. Amazing.
So
Thank you
I'll
for that.
nominate Heather to go next.
Perfect. Let's do it like that. Yeah.
Thank
Then you
you.
nominate somebody else. Great.
All right, so I can nominate someone else. Well, thank you very much. It's been really, really good, really, really interesting. One word, I would say focus for me.
Amazing. Thank you. Nominate someone, Heather.
Simon. Mr. Lloyd.
I just need to turn my mic on. Technologically deficient would probably be mine, but that's 2 words. I would say really thought-provoking. I know that's more than one word, but
We'll let
really
you get away with it, Simon. Amazing. Thank you for that. Nominate someone, Simon.
Chris, please.
Thanks, Simon. Refreshing. Refreshing.
Amazing. Thank you. Such nice words. Nominate someone, Chris.
Oh, guess that's you, Catherine.
Yeah, apologies for being late. Confusion with my diary. I thought it was starting at 12 and I was feeling good that I was early to arrive.
I hope you didn't miss that much, though.
I would say I feel motivated, stimulated, curious, and motivated. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for that, Catherine. You want to nominate someone? I think did we just have Linda left?
Yep, that's me. I'm left. I would say inspired.
Wow, amazing. Such great words, such great terms. Okay, so I'm happy to close here. If anybody wants to talk to me more, please do so. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn if you want to catch up with me. I do write a lot of inclusive content on LinkedIn, so please do connect with me on there. I hope you have a great rest of the day, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Thanks for all
Before
your help on
everybody
this.
goes, just a quick reminder that
thanks a
we're all
lot.
having the
Cheerio.
board meeting next week on the 21st, and I look
Indeed.
forward to seeing everybody there. And don't forget the time of the board meeting is different to what we've done before. So just please do check what time we're actually meeting so you don't come at the wrong time.
Especially me.
You're on
No
check.
comment.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Nice to see you all.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, perfect.